Hello, everyone. Hello, Andy, on what is now the third day of COP. Exciting. There is
I'm
certainly
losing track of the days already. There's so much happening
yeah,
already. I've lost track of
I
which day it
know.
is. I think I think officially it's day two. I think Sunday obviously was the opening ceremony, and I sort of counted
Yeah.
day one as yesterday. But it's there's so much happening already.
Yeah, I think that yesterday was the first sort of proper day, as they call it, and there is certainly a lot to take in. And what are your feelings and thoughts after the first proper day?
Well, it's just, I think, quite overwhelming. I mean, we knew this was going to be a big event, and having seen previous COPs take place, we know it's huge. But I don't think I expected quite as much media coverage as there is. I mean, the BBC, probably understandably, is wall-to-wall coverage of COP26. And of course, it's incredibly appealing for journalists, not least because it's sort of historic, and those are always appealing things for the media, but also it's lots of free content that's really easy to make, because it's a bit like, I do a lot of work at the Olympic Games. It's a bit like that. You just point the cameras and you've got lots of great content. So inside the venues, outside the venues, Glasgow, of course, is a place that is completely overwhelmed by people from all sides of the political spectrum talking about what's going on. And I think it's been incredible. I think we've seen so much happen in just 24 hours, both in terms of the controversies as to whether leaders are doing enough or whether they can do enough in the time they've got, and also some of the commitments that have been made already. So we saw the big headline yesterday was around deforestation, which leaders have committed to reducing and cutting it by 2030. And that's quite significant because the leaders that have signed up to this cover collectively a geographical territory of 85% of the world's forests. So it's a big one, and I think it's probably the first big headline that we have had. But of course, we've had the Prime Minister's speech, we've had the Queen's speech, and David Attenborough, which I think you saw yesterday as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his speech was obviously probably made the biggest impact emotionally of everyone on everyone who was watching. But it was quite remarkable that there was this underlying message of hope. You know, he called us the best problem solvers in the history of the world, which is a very strong statement, and it's also true. And we should make use of that. And you know, our generations now should go down in history as those who managed to push forward and solve the crisis, and not just stay in it. And I think it's also remarkable the fact that both him and the Queen actually underlined the fact that we need to work together. All of us need to work together, both the leaders and the people on the ground. And this is something that also I think Prime Minister Justin Trudeau referred to as well, saying that it's also people on the ground, you know, the engineers, the technicians, the people, the scientists who will be actually working on these solutions are the ones who are sort of on the front line on this fight with climate change, and we can't forget that. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do, but it's I'm quite hopeful after yesterday, I have to say.
It's hard not to be when David Attenborough gets on a stage,
Yeah.
and of course partly because he has been around for so long, and I've certainly noticed in his documentaries there has been a lot of sort of almost autobiographical reflections on his career, both as someone that has of course traveled the world and been a contributor to a lot of the emissions that raises because of his own footprint, but also I think that sense of reflection on his life and what he wants for the future, and that speech where he talked particularly about the fact that over his lifetime he has witnessed this decline, and yet these leaders that are here can witness the revival of species. And I think that's a really important message to get across, because it does sort of remind people that there is still a great deal that can be done, and a big part of that has to do with what sorts of things we create, which is why it's wonderful to have joining us at the very last minute Dr. Claudia Trillo, who I'm going to invite into the stage now, whose work in architecture is very focused on sustainability. So welcome in, Claudia. Great to see you here.
Good morning, everybody. Glad to see you.
And it's great to have you, because we really fixed this up about 2 minutes ago to have you join. And each morning over this fortnight, we've got scholars, students joining from different disciplines all over the university, talking about their reflections on COP, some of the things that they're seeing, and some of the things they would hope for the future. So tell us what you've noticed so far, Claudia. How's it been for you? Have you followed some of the news?
Yes, I have been following some of the news. I have been watching some of the streaming or recordings. So everything sounds absolutely fantastic, and the commitment of the UK government on this COP26 seems really great. It's great to see that the government is leading with such a passion on these, and it's also great to see that these things keep the momentum going on environmental sustainability. However, I also had a few serious concerns by watching once again what's going on streaming on COP26 and reading the outcomes from the G20 meeting, which was concluded in Rome last Sunday. And what really concerns me and is making me think that we really need to push more from bottom up as a citizens before then as scholars, as scientists. We need to do it as citizens. We need more actions and less words, and we need more serious commitment. So I have read that still the most polluting countries of the world are committing to postpone, at the end, this is what it is, their promise for cutting emissions of CO2 up to the 2060, even to the 2070. Well, I don't think that I will be around on those years. My daughter will, but I won't. So I was just wondering which kind of accountability political leaders can have on targets which will which will happen when they are in their graves. So the reality is that I will be in my grave possibly when those targets should be met. I won't even be there to check if they kept up with their promises. And the whole point is that the urgency of climate change hasn't been understood. That's my major concern. And that's why I thought that I should have jumped into this session to have a say. This is absolutely not enough. So it's not clear either how we are close to the tipping point for a big catastrophe, because the reality is that, for example, Amazon has already stopped to absorb CO2 and has started to emit more than it absorbs. And Bolsonaro is not there. So my question would be, I don't agree with the leader from Barbados who said whoever is here should start to cooperate. I think that the pledge should be whoever is not there and is responsible should get some sort of a very strong penalty in economical terms. Otherwise, there will be no need for cooperating. So collaboration is a nice thing. And I was really pleased to hear from the Queen that she said we need to have hope. Whenever we have people gathering together, we have hope. The problem is who is not there and who is not committing enough should be penalized economically. Otherwise, there won't be any interest in committing more for the environmental cause. And yes, this is all what is happening in Glasgow is fantastic, but we need to be very conscious as citizens that it's just a step. So we need to be very well aware of what's going on around, and we need to intervene and to push more. So COP26 shouldn't be the way to tell ourselves, okay, we are fine.
And I think there's really important points. It's great to see some comments coming in through the chat already. Tim's mentioned that Joe Biden falling asleep doesn't fill him with hope, which of course I think is one of the clips from yesterday. But I wonder, because obviously the complexity of the problem and the scale of that is one of the things that often overwhelms people. So the targets to stop deforestation is of course significant, but as was recognized yesterday, the land that is now empty or because of deforestation is now filled by animals that are then farmed. And unless you address people's consumption of meat, we cannot utilize space again for growing trees. And that's a really complex, everything affects everything else, doesn't it? And I know your work, particularly in architecture, where there's lots of discussions about the use of concrete. What's happening in that sort of area for you? What are you seeing?
Well, in architecture, the UK is really doing well, in my view. Our professional associations and the professional bodies have done a very clear commitment towards a more sustainable architecture. So the architect registration body, the architect registration board, which is our statutory body here in the UK, has issued in September 2021 new guidance on sustainability, which state a few principles, starting from retrofit first. So whenever you can reuse, you reuse rather than building something new. Fabric first, which means the less mechanical stuff we can have in order to keep our environments nice, the better. So building should work with the physics of ventilation, sunlight, etc., rather than with energy consumption. And other few things which I won't go into the details with, including, for example, waste management, water management, etc. For what concerns our Royal Institute of British Architects, which is also a very prominent organization for architects, not only in the UK but also worldwide, we are now following the so-called RIBA 2030 challenge, which has as a first target the reduction of embodied carbon before offsetting. This is also very important because we do need to reduce carbon emissions along the entire lifespan of our buildings. So it's not enough having a fantastic building which, in order to be built, has used a lot of carbon emissions, for example, to produce the steel necessary for the structures, as well as we need to produce buildings which can be easily adaptable in the future and also reused as much as possible. So the way in which we design is changing, and I'm really very happy about that, because yesterday night I was reading this book, which is about sustainable architecture from 2000, which I bought as a young architect. At that time it was niche, and today is the norm. So I'm really glad to say that the architecture in this country is doing very well.
It's really incredible to hear those comments, and it makes me think about how we teach and what's within our curriculum. And obviously within your work, there's, I'm sure, already a lot about sustainability brought into your teaching, but obviously universities have a role to play, perhaps in all subjects, to think about how climate awareness, climate education is present, whether you're studying art, science, business or health. It seems that it needs to be there.
Well, I think that the University of Salford is really a front runner. I don't know if you have noticed that the chair of COP26 is an alumno from Salford.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that. Really? Who is that?
He studied the physics at Salford.
My goodness, how did we miss that? We have to follow up with that one, Marta.
Yeah.
It's that's incredible to hear. And certainly, yes, you're right. Lots has been happening at Salford for many years in this area. And we were talking yesterday about Energy House and Energy House 2.0. And Marta, what have we got coming up over the next couple of weeks that really excites you? I guess today, what's happening today? Maybe start off with that.
Yeah, so today, as on COP, the World Summit, with the World Leaders Summit continues, and we have more leader statement, more talk about forest and land use specifically, and innovation and clean technologies coming up. On the university's social media takeover on LinkedIn, we will be focusing on what students think of COP26, why it is important to them. So we'll be able to hear some student voices. And then in the afternoon, we have a launch event for a Salford-made application called US Sorted. Would you like to actually talk a little bit more about the app, as I know you are more involved in it than me?
Yeah, I'd love to. And it's a really fantastic program that's been led by Dr. Alex Fenton in the business school. And it's bringing together a range of people to think about healthy lifestyles in the university. We're all familiar, of course, with mobile phones that track our physical activity. And they work often because they're really great at establishing communities. So the university has supported Dr. Fenton in creating a dedicated, specific university mobile app to track our fitness. So you can record your steps, you can chat to people, and we have the launch of it today. And of course, it's part of a bigger push towards healthier lifestyles, encouraging people to to be more active, to take active travel rather than passive travel. But it's also about connecting people together as well. And it's clear from data that if we share what we do in terms of physical activity, then we tend to do more. And that helps us then all be hopefully much more healthy, and it's connected to those broader ambitions around sustainability too, because of course if we are more active, then we're using less travel that requires all kinds of fuels and consumption. So the launch is taking place at, I think it's 1 o'clock we have today over at the Peel campus, so people can join 1 till 4. There's there's a heated outdoor marquee. I feel like heated is a bit of a contradiction in terms of our message, but of course we now know the weather has turned remarkably cold. So we're over at Peel Park. There'll be a walk around the park. There'll be free food and refreshments, and you can learn more about the app and how to get involved. There's already quite a nice community of people using the app. So if you haven't downloaded it from the Apple or Google Play stores, then you can, and start tracking your steps. And you can also track your steps on it whilst doing it on other apps as well. So it doesn't matter if you use other apps too, you can still use the Us Sorted app. So look forward to that. And it's nice to have a face-to-face meeting, of course, given that so much of what we're doing is digital. But what's wonderful is that we can be present in COP even though we're not there physically, and it's a tough decision to know whether to travel if you don't really need to these days. But we've got certainly a number of our staff and students are over in Glasgow during the fortnight, but we'll be talking to them over the next few days as well. So Claudia, what's your kind of hopes for COP? I mean, obviously it is, we've seen Greta Thunberg yesterday talk more about, I guess, ultimately an inherent sort of criticism of the leaders, which speaks to a lot of what you've said. But how do you feel about what they need to do going forward, and how we need to act to encourage their changes?
Well, I think that I couldn't be more in agreement with the Prince Charles' words when he said that we need to turn commitments into something which can be used by the industry. So the reality is that we need a transformation of the economic system. This was made very clear also from the Dasgupta review last March. So we need a transformation which is not for free. And so we need budget commitments. The budget needs to be aligned, and the northern part of the planet has created this disaster. The northern part of the planet should pay to resolve it. So the result of this terrible situation is that the global south is suffering more, and we need more justice in terms of financial arrangements. So possibly a proper fund established through the budgets of the northern globe countries, and more clear commitments with sub-targets achievable in a timing which is compatible with the political commitment and accountability. So no more targets when I will be in my grave.
Yeah, and that was certainly one of the criticisms yesterday, that the $100 billion target that was set for helping the poorer nations by 2020 to cut their emissions was never met. And I think this is why you can see over and over again people feeling very disheartened by the absence of actual financial commitments, particularly to climate injustice, which you've raised, and which is, I think, for me, it was central again to David Attenborough's speech yesterday. And I think it's the one thing that people need to figure out. And I guess partly just sort of reflecting on the last 18 months, you know, we still see the WHO calling for the richer nations to donate vaccinations to the poorer nations. And it's hard not to come out of that year and a half period and see those massive injustices and feel that this is going to be really difficult to solve, because people still, when it comes down to survival, think of themselves. And how do you motivate people to see themselves as part of one planet, one collective, one community, when we have these geographical barriers? I mean, it's a hard one to solve, but people need to see themselves as connected to others in other parts of the world in order to make that kind of commitment.
Sure.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This is the end of our second live. We've got the event happening at 1 o'clock today, so please do come down to join us then. And we're back tomorrow with Professor Jean Bublé, who's done work all over the world, including the Amazon, and we'll be talking about the loss of biodiversity and just how much of what's happening in Glasgow has an impact on the range of species that we see on our planet. So thanks for joining us, Claudia, and Marta. I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah,
Bye.
see you
Thank you.
tomorrow. Thank you very
Okay,
much,
take care.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.